The abuse at the boys' home continued for 5 years after MI5 asked Gemmell to drop his investigation. Yet a later police report into Kincora would make no mention of this, and instead would praise the cooperation of the intelligence services. But my police sources told a very different story. They complained about MI5 obstruction, requests to interview the MI5 officer who'd ordered Brian Gemmell to drop all interest in Kincora, Tara and McGrath were ignored. MI5 simply refused to produce the officer. My sources say this amounted to a cover-up. The police report was written by Sir George Terry, a chief constable brought in from an English force. But as with a subsequent public inquiry, MI5's involvement was never meaningfully investigated.
I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that many police officers at a senior level in the RUC at that time believed that George Terry had been handed a great can of white paint and sent here to pour it over everything and cover it up. And I think his report speaks for itself. The fact that the later tribunal didn't produce any damning or serious conclusions, again reflects an official attitude that there's nothing here, move on.
The big question remains, what was so important about Kincora that had MI5 involved in a cover-up?
That is the question to which all of Northern Ireland still awaits answers, and particularly the boys who were abused in that home await answers. There has still been no real accountability apart from the 3 workers who were found criminally responsible. There's been no other accountability for those who perpetrated the abuse, or indeed potentially those who authorised it or who organised a subsequent cover-up.
Some of those abused at Kincora believe they suffered because MI5 chose to protect an agent and put their own operation ahead of the boys' welfare.
I'm aware that there's a section within the security forces who will use any means to achieve their goal. The fact that they had to sacrifice young boys like myself, young men like myself to do it, that there is very, very hard to accept. I want the state to answer me, was it worth it? Your dirty tricks, was it really, really worth it? Did you get anything of any value out of it? I would say the answer to that would be no. It didn't change one thing to what was going on in Northern Ireland. Gee, damn all.
Clint's abuser, William McGrath, served 2 years of a 4-year jail sentence. In 1990, I went to his home in Ballyhalbert on the Ards Peninsula. I wanted to ask why the security services had been so keen to cover up his crimes. When I met William McGrath here in Ballyhalbert, he told me he was the only person who knew the true story of Kincora. He didn't share that with me then, and he didn't share it with anyone before he died, taking his secrets to the grave. Significantly, all the inquiries into Kincora have said the abuse started and finished in the home. All were adamant there was no paedophile ring. But all those years ago, I knew of one boy who told police he had been taken outside Kincora to have sex with unidentified men. His story blows apart the official version that has persisted for decades. 32 years ago, at the conclusion of the Kincora trial, I tried to trace a number of the former residents in Kincora. One of the boys I was particularly keen to speak to was Richard Kerr. I didn't find him then, but strangely 2 months ago he got in touch with me from his home here in Dallas. He's been living here since 1986. It seemed he was ready to talk about his life in Kincora. I'd brought with me notes on Richard Kerr, typed up in the BBC many years before. These are some notes that I've managed to keep in files. The date at the top of these notes is the 31st of October 1983, and this is the section that I find most interesting because it refers to diaries that I had access to for a time. Diaries that were kept in the drawer of the desk in the office at Kincora. And in this it tells a story about a boy from West Belfast being released on a number of weekends to an address in West Belfast. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that, except that the address doesn't exist, and according to local people I spoke to, that's what I've written here, it has never existed. But the false address did not help me find Richard Kerr in 1982. What I didn't know then was that he'd already left Belfast. The name of Richard Kerr is prominent in here. He had a very important story to tell. If you read these notes, it's taken me a long time though to hear that story. Richard was in care from the age of 5 until he was 18. He was sexually abused at every public facility he was sent to. He arrived at Kincora when he was just 14. Warden Joe Mains appeared to have an interest in Richard's welfare.
I got close to Joseph Mains. He was the head warden of Kincora. And one night he invited me down to his office. And then he invited me to his room. And then he would talk to me and told me that I really care for you. I really like you. He made me feel special that first evening. He offered me some whiskey. And then he had some whiskey.
Richard was flattered by the attention Mains was giving him, but he was being lured into a paedophile ring.
Me and my best friend, we would go out on trips. And one time we went to the Park Avenue Hotel, and we would have be in the lounge, and we would have drinks, and there was other gentlemen there. And one of them would ask one of us to go up to the room, and we would perform oral sex in one of the rooms at the Park Avenue Hotel. And then when I would come downstairs, we acted like nothing happened, and then we'd order more drinks.
You were what age at this time?
At this time I was going on 16. I was not 16, but I was in my 15th year.
Were there other places that you were taking?
No, there was other places. There was a hotel in Portrush. I do not know the name of that hotel, but I do know it was on Main Street.
Was it ever made clear to you that by Joe Mains that you were expected to perform sexual favours for the other men? Did he ever say that to you?
No, not at first. When we would drive out, we would get there, it was always alcohol that I would be asked to drink. And he would say to me that, we have somebody nice, why don't you go up and spend some time with him, he's got a gift for you.
Right.
And they would sit in the bar area while I would go upstairs in the elevator to a room. We would walk in, and this person said, well, get comfortable, just relax, everything's going to be fine. And they would get on the bed with me, and we would have a sexual encounter.
What sort of gifts did they give you then? Did you receive a gift?
Chocolates, things like that. A watch, a small transmit radio, just little gifts.
Yeah. The years of abuse have left Richard very damaged and in need of professional help.
When you're dealing with people that have his kind of problems, they don't recognize the post-traumatic stress disorder type of situation which he has. Those who have gone through the kind of extraordinary stress that he has had do display these symptoms. And in some cases, they don't display them until later in life. They're able to adapt to the type of abusive daily routine that seems to be ordinary. And then once they see that it's not ordinary, then it becomes one that they are feeling guilty and shameful about.
It was clear the boys in the hostel, like Richard, felt trapped and alone.
I would talk to my friend when we were in our bedrooms at night, and he said, "It's always best not to say nothing, Richard. Nobody's going to believe you."
What's shocking is that Richard had informed the police during interviews in the early 1980s about being taken to hotels and private houses for sex. But the police rejected this as evidence of an organised paedophile network. Today, Richard is adamant that he and a friend of his, who he says killed himself as a result of the abuse, were the victims of a paedophile ring.
Looking back with an open mind, I can see that there was a vast, huge group of people were involved in this.
So there was a network.
It was a huge network. Because children that I have spoken to have said that this has been done to them. It was done to my friends. It was done to people that I came into contact after they left the home. It was surely done to people of my friends who committed suicide.
What we have revealed tonight indicates that the extent of crimes and the cover-up at Kincora is much wider than previously thought, and casts a shadow over the cover-up that has been denied for decades. Richard Kerr's testimony has strengthened demands for a full inquiry.
What we're talking about here is not simply what came to light in the criminal trial in 1981 with 3 men found guilty, but what we're talking about potentially is a very well organised paedophile ring. Those boys deserve the truth, and wider society deserves and is entitled to accountability for that sort of criminal activity.
In Great Britain, the Jimmy Savile scandal has been followed by a number of deeply troubling cases where those in positions of power and authority appear to have failed to have acted on information about child abuse. It's for this reason that the government has set up an overarching inquiry into institutional abuse. Many are calling for Kincora to be included in that new inquiry, among them Keith Vaz MP, Chair of the Home Affairs Committee at